Oh, sorry. God forbid, I was muted. So sorry. There's no sound the first minute. I apologize
God
about
forbid,
that.
I was muted.
Okay, so here we are, Duvid back. Oliver, thanks for being in the chat. Yeah, sorry, a few minutes late. I was preparing Niggin. This Saturday night, I'm going to kick off a new series, which will be Jewish history related. Maybe I'll just call Ask the Rabbi or something like Jewish history, Jewish concepts. And the first one will be about the history of Hasidim. So this is my third week doing my Jewish library, my fourth episode. So as you see behind me, I have 4 shelves on Judaism. The first one I did was on biographies of the sages. So I introduced it with my biographies of the sages, which was mostly Orthodox publishing companies. And then I did my Jewish history books and some on Jewish culture. So like and that was the majority of my Jewish books. And within Jewish history, I had Hasidism, yeshivas, American Jewish history, Israel, Palestine. I had these big books, tabletop books, and a whole shelf of architecture and synagogue history books. And so I found that pretty enlightening. And so now, hopefully, I'm going to finish up the rest of my Jewish books, about a shelf and a half. Although I may not take my Talmud, at least 2 shelves of Talmud that I may not take off of the shelf. Like I never bought like a set. Like a lot of times people get married, they get a fancy set of Talmud, or their bar mitzvah. People get a present as the whole shas. So my Talmud I bought one at a time. Some of them I studied in yeshiva or studied at different times, Daf Yomi and various things. So John, thanks for tuning in. So let me start out with a quick chant because I'm going to talk about my Hasidus and Kabbalah books, and it's a very serious subject. So better start with a serious chant. So I've chanted this one before. This is the Skulener Rebbe tune for Vayeda Bagoyim, Psalm 79, and like God forbid the rising anti-Semitism. I had Hanukkah, the local Chabad yeshiva, the Southfield public menorah lighting. Say Hanukkah, the light of Hanukkah, the light of Torah. Good deeds is the solution to anti-Semitism. The statement E. Michael Jones makes, but a lot of the sages say the cause of anti-Semitism is sinful behavior, bad Jewish behavior, and but doesn't excuse hate crimes, God forbid, or people doing stupid things. So here's Psalm 79. Wherefore should the nations say, where is their God? That the avenging of God's servant's blood that is shed be known among the nations in our sight, that the groaning of the prisoner come before God, according to the greatness of your power, set free those that are appointed to death, and render upon the neighbors sevenfold into their bosom their reproach, where within they have reproached Lord thy God. So you're just kind of saying, God forbid, the blood of the righteous will be avenged. The nation should not say, where is the God of the Jews? So you can't pick on the Jewish people and get away with it. Although if the Jewish people behave badly, we will also be punished. And so this is this famous Skulener Rebbe and Skulener Rebbe, who I studied under for a few years. I served on Lava Malka, and you're one of the more respected Hasidic Rebbe sages, even Kabbalists of last generation, just passing away a few years ago. Psalm 79, verse 10 through 12. Yehuda b'hagoyim li'einai naini nidbarach mas dam avudak v'b'dam avudak hashuvu fi v'yuda b'agoyim li'ei einaini nikmas dam avudechu v'dam avudechu hashuvu fi tavo tavo lifonechu enkasusir Kigoy del Zoroyahu, Hoyser b'nei Samusa, Savoy Tavoy Lepunehu. Enkasusir, Kigoy del Zorachu, Hoyser b'nei Samusa, V'hushev l'shkineini, Shivasayim melchekam, Pasam asher chapichu Hashem v'ushev l'shkineini shivasayim melchekam Pasam asher chapichu Hashem. Okay, that's a tough niggin, semi-well-known Hasidic tune, singing like Satmar, but that was one of the Skulener Rebbe's favorite tunes. God forbid, went through a lot of suffering, survived the war, and the avenging the blood of the righteous. And people shouldn't think that there is no God. That where is their God? God is present, and the blood of the righteous is avenged. Okay, so with that, set a more serious tune. I will go over my Hasidus and Kabbalah books, and I guess I'll start with my Kabbalah books. So, just briefly to mention, when we see my Torah books, first I started Talmud study. Like when I turned 18, I went to Israel. And I started studying Talmud and Torah and the mainstream Orthodox subjects. And then after I got to Israel, in Jerusalem, I found some Hasidic Rebbes, the Tolstoy Rebbe, the Kretchnov Rebbe, eventually Rabbi Daniel Hirsch, a few other rabbis, and libraries and books. And Kabbalah was always very interesting to me. Kabbalah is not a topic of yeshiva study. And thanks, Tristan, for tuning in. So Kabbalah is not a topic of yeshiva study. And even in Hasidic yeshivas, Kabbalah is not a topic of Hasidic study. Hasidus, as the Lubavitch Rebbe said, is based on Kabbalah, has Kabbalah intermixed within it, but it's not a straight study of Kabbalah. Although most of the sages, even the Litvish sages, are thought to understand Kabbalah, have studied it at some point. There's the Zohar, there's the famous texts, but the subject always interested me, and more from the theoretical level of how does God work? Because I was an atheist for a brief period of time in high school. I had a scientific background. I'd mentioned the Tanya, the books that changed my life, and Chaim Delphin, but Avram Yaakov Braun in Borough Park. After about 6 months, I'd been in Israel, and I on a trip back to America, stayed at his house for Sabbath, and he bought me a Tanya, and I started studying Tanya, and that was my first introduction to Kabbalah. And then in Israel, I used to go to this bookstore, English bookstore, was not a religious bookstore, and buy some books on Kabbalah. And then I found my Rev. Daniel Frisch of blessed memory, of the Told Sovereign Yitzchak Rebbe, ate his house Sabbath many times, and he one of the most famous commentators on the Zohar. And you wrote a translation on the Zohar and a commentary, and I ate at his house Shabbos almost every week, like all the time, like a few times, more than once a month for the whole time. Yeah, I was in Israel once I found him after a few months, tens of times, maybe even 50 times, and maybe even 100 times, who knows. And I went to other Kabbalists, Itchy Morgenstern. Later I found him in no, actually that was when I went back in Israel. So Spiemeier Zilberberg, who I'm chanting on my channel from, also a well-known Kabbalist speaker in Jerusalem. Then the Jerker Rebbe, Rabbi Breslov in Borough Park, who was Talmud of Rav Ashlag. And so there's relatively not that many rabbis who teach Kabbalah. There's a handful of them. Some of them are semi-respected, and they focus on text, and they're fully within the realm of Orthodox Hasidic Judaism without exception. I mean, say that all respected Kabbalists are full Orthodox Jews. They do the mitzvahs. They keep the Torah. They're within the Orthodox society. A lot of the books are written by scholars. There's some decent books written by Israeli scholars and by like Rabbi Berg, the Kabbalah Institute. There's some decent books written by academics. There's the Gershon Schoen books. I'll show the Gershon Schoen, who was an Israeli professor, escaped the war in Europe, and he's the most famous author, scholar of Kabbalah in Israel, but he was not religious and is more an academic scholar. So like whether Kabbalah is true or whether it works, it's unclear, like, of the scholarship of, so it's an alternative system. I'm not going to get too much into Kabbalah and what it is. Hopefully, like this week I'll do the history of Hasidus, and maybe Saturday night, and if that goes well, over the next few weeks, I'll talk specifically about Kabbalah and some of the Kabbalistic concepts. So today I'm just going to go over books and my library. So I'm going to start with, and I have my Hanukkah candles. So the sun should go down at some point, and I will cut the stream. I mean, I will, in the middle of the stream, I will light Hanukkah candles and maybe chant a few more songs, Nagunim, and finish my book. So maybe about 5 o'clock as the sun starts going down, I will light my Hanukkah candles. So ironically, there was this one African-American woman who used to sell anti-Semitic literature outside of the city hall in Brooklyn. When I did building permits, most of the government offices are in the same building. There's a few of them, but the Department of Buildings was in City Hall, and there was a woman who had a table outside, and she sold different books, not just anti-Semitic literature, but a good portion, probably like 25% of the literature she sold was anti-Semitic. And she actually would have like the protocols, the Elders of Zion. Like every day you go into the department, like in downtown Brooklyn. I mean, she might even still be there, God forbid. New York City, almost all African Americans. But in public squares, like outside of buildings, and you'll see selling anti-Semitic literature, some stuff on Freemasonry, and she had good books. I bought some books on Freemasonry, and I even bought a few of her um, counter-Semitic books. God forbid. Um, but then one day, all of a sudden, I started selling these books on Kabbalah. So ironically, this woman who sold anti-Semitic literature right outside of the Brooklyn City Hall had books on Kabbalah. I guess like she didn't usually sell books on Kabbalah. I guess she needed money, and so she put her Kabbalah books up for sale. So I bought her Kabbalah books off of her, all of them. And so just a random, ironic story, and somewhat the connection of Kabbalah. Like anti-Semitism, the nature of evil, of the origins of the soul. Kabbalah proposes to explain all these very complicated concepts. And so I'm mentioning this book, Kabbalah: An Illustrated Introduction to the Esoteric Heart of Jewish Mysticism by Tim Didipolis, that I bought off the street from this African American woman who sold anti-Semitic literature. And decent book. It has introduction, pictures, a little historical background, the worlds and the spheros, generic, okay, introductory book. Here's another, Jacob Trachtenberg, a Jewish scholar, Jewish Magic and Superstition, a Study in Folk Religion. And this is kind of historical overview, not that much with Kabbalah, more in magic and superstition. So Duvid's not into magic, and I put it together in my Kabbalah section, and because there's the connection with Kabbalah and magic. Here's an interesting book. I got this Shaman Drums, this academic book, Planets, Potions, and Parchment, Scientific Hebraica from the Dead Sea Scrolls to the 18th Century. Levi, the Jewish Public Library. And this is a collection of manuscripts, some of them Kabbalistic, a lot of them astrological, some of them magic, parchments, various things. So interesting collection of actually pictures of manuscripts, most of them in Hebrew. Here, I got at a local event from the Well, Rabbi Dan Horowitz. I actually might eventually, I want to do the history of Tikkun Olam, future Ask the Rabbi. So there's an article on the history of Tikkun Olam. This one's called The Assimilation of Tikkun Olam, Levi Cooper, which talks about Tikkun Olam, how it became a fundamental Jewish concept in its history. And here's another one, The History of Tikkun Olam by Jill Jacobs, of a liberal Jewish feminist rabbi. But Tikkun Olam, is a Kabbalistic concept also. But okay. So here's two decent books. Arthur Green. Arthur Green's one of the more popular authors on Hasidus and Kabbalah in English. And here is Encyclopedia History of Jewish Spirituality from the Bible to the Middle Ages, and part 2 from the 16th century revival to the present. And it has collected essays from various scholars on historical periods. So it's calling Jewish spirituality, which could include some deep Kabbalah or basic overviews. So, like, decent read. Here's a good book, academic book, Lawrence Fine, Physician of the Soul, Healer of the Cosmos, Isaac Luria in his Kabbalistic Fellowship. So there's more history. It has some concepts, but it's more an academic history of it's Stanford's Jewish Studies, academic history of the Arizal, Isaac Luria, and his students. Here's a famous book, Gershon Schoen, Major Trends in Jewish Mysticism. I have quite a few Gershon Schoen. He's the major Hebrew academic, and I think these might even be translated into English. He wrote the huge book on Sabbatai Tzvi. He wrote like tens of books, like in Israeli academia, and he studied. He probably, he's not considered a Kabbalist. He's not considered a sage. He was secular, but he's the most well-known of the Kabbalistic scholars. And he passed away decades ago. He was already, a scholar before World War II in Europe, and then became one of the most well-known Jewish professors. I have a few of his books. Here, Philip Berg. So Philip Berg, the Kabbalah Center. So, most popular in America Kabbalist is Philip Berg from the Kabbalah Center. And Philip Berg lineage is a student of the Ashlag, the Bala Sulam, who wrote the first translation on the Zohar into Hebrew about 100 years ago, and was in Jerusalem. And the Jerker Rebbe, as I mentioned, Rabbi Breslov, was also a student of Rev Ashlag. And Philip Berg, I guess, was somewhat of an Orthodox Jew, student of Rev Ashlag, and then decided to take Kabbalah to the public and opened up the Kabbalah Center. And honestly, his books aren't that bad. Like you could say Philip Berg knows basic Kabbalah. He studied under Rev Ashlag, and his books are decent, introductory material. So here's Philip Berg, Kabbalistic Astrology Made Easy. I think people ask me about astrology, so Philip Berg talking about astrology, and a lot of times, most Kabbalah is not that astrological. There is some Kabbalah based on astrology, but generally it's understood that astrology is a force that has power, but you could rise above it. So Philip Berg. Here's the other basic Philip Berg, Kabbalah for the layman. Nice introduction. I have a numerous basic introductions. So Philip Berg's Kabbalah for the layman, very nice basic introduction, the rabbi of the Kabbalah Center. And here's another very nice introduction. This was written in Hebrew, was one of the most popular books in Israel, Yedid Nefesh, by Rabbi Yechiel Bar Lev. In Hebrew, wrote Yedid Nefesh, and I think it sold hundreds of thousands of copies, was one of the best sellers. Kabbalah is more popular among secular Israelis than religious Israelis. So maybe we'll talk more about that, but I say like the actual study of Kabbalah, very few Orthodox Jews formally study Kabbalah, but in Israel they came up with Yedid Nefesh, and it was a bestseller among secular Jews. And here's the English translation, Song of the Soul. This is probably a little bit better than the Rabbi Berg books, and it's introduction of the basic concepts. Here's an academic book, The Origins of Jewish Mysticism by Peter Schaefer, a non-Jew, and I think he was the head of like a Holocaust museum in Europe, and they got rid of him because some politics there. But this is more academic, questioning the origins of Kabbalah. It's your first appearance in Hebrew text, the Apostle Ezekiel's vision, Enoch, the book of Enoch, what we know in the Qumran scrolls, Philo. You mentioned like Philo and the Demiurge, and then various Talmudic rabbis to the later Merkava mystics, and so pretty good book, academic overview of the origins of Kabbalah, Peter Schaefer. Also, I'll show more, the Aryeh Kaplan. So I'm actually friends with Aryeh Kaplan's nephew, who's a rabbi, David Kaplan, a rabbi in New Jersey. We studied together, and actually, I lived in the basement for a while of the house where Aryeh Kaplan lived. So, Rabbi um, Schechter, Aryeh Schechter, who's a sofer and a Menasseh Ben Israel, makes mezuzahs and tefillin. The small tefillin guy lives in the house of like the duplex, in the other apartment is where Aryeh Kaplan used to live, and I guess it's probably his family that still lives there. But so Aryeh Kaplan is probably the most well-known author, popular author in America of Kabbalistic texts. And here is his meditation in the Bible, and I'll show his most popular bestseller um, on Jewish meditation, which is also one of the earlier books I've read. A lot of people, when they get into Jewish mysticism, it's through Aryeh Kaplan's Jewish meditation. And so, Jewish meditation is an introduction to meditation, and the meditation of the Bible gives some of the concepts about like the angels and God's names in deeper levels. Although most of the Aryeh Kaplan books are also introductory. Here, Rabbi David Aaron's Seeing God, the Life-Changing Lessons of Kabbalah, also just kind of introductory stories to help understand the basics of Kabbalah. Here's an academic book, also Lawrence Fine, the same author of Physician of the Soul, that's collected essays on essential papers in Kabbalah from mostly scholars. So Elliot Ginsberg, I have Elliot Ginsberg as a professor at University of Michigan. I have him chanting on my YouTube page. So you see him, he has like an earring and doesn't wear a yarmulke. And he teaches Kabbalah at University of Michigan, teaches the Zohar and Kabbalah classes at University of Michigan. Daniel Mott wrote a translation of the Zohar. All these are, they're not like secular, but they're not Orthodox. They're not respected in yeshiva Orthodox circles. They have some connection to Judaism, conservative, pray a little bit. But our scholars, academic scholars, hold university posts in America. So here's a collection, Essential Papers on Kabbalah, edited by Lawrence Fine. This is an interesting book, like Adam Green type stuff. I think Adam Green actually has this book. Alexander Mandelbaum, Redemption Unfolding, The Last Exile of Israel, Chevlei Mashiach, The War of Gog and Magog, and The Final Redemption. And this is actually a Feldheim book and a collection from the Hebrew sages, including Kabbalists, about what's going to happen at the end of days. The various concepts of war, Gog and Magog, Final Redemption, Chevlei Mashiach, the exile, the kind of stuff that Adam Green likes to talk about. Also, so Aryeh Kaplan, Immortality, Resurrection, and the Age of the Universe, a Kabbalistic view. Aryeh Kaplan was I think he was a Baal Teshuva somewhat. He might have had like a traditional Jewish background. He had a degree in physics, then he became Orthodox and studied, and he died young. And wrote a lot of books. So I don't have the whole Aryeh Kaplan library, but I think I read almost all of his books. With various libraries when I was in New York, in Israel. I read through. Jewish books are kind of expensive, especially these small publishers. But if you're really into it, you could read the whole Aryeh Kaplan, especially if you're limited to the English language. You recommend the whole Aryeh Kaplan collection. Here, The Book of the Worlds by Dror Moshe Kazuto. And this might be a Breslover. So this is more a Breslov book. I'm going to put it with my Breslov books. And I actually got it. He came to Metro Detroit. So it has like the Tree of Life on it, but I'll put it with my Breslov books. This I actually also bought off of that African-American woman who sold anti-Semitic literature in front of a city hall in Brooklyn. Kabbalah Inspirations, Mystic Themes, Texts, and Symbols. Just a short book overview, intro stuff. This was an interesting book. I read from some of it for Week in Review, and From Ashes to Healing, Mystical Encounters with the Holocaust. And these are stories of people who believe that they were reincarnated Holocaust survivors, like people living today that claim to be the reincarnations of people who died during the Holocaust. And he collected together stories, as I've mentioned Week in Review in my Ask the Rabbi on Reincarnation. Reincarnation is a central concept to Kabbalah, the Aryeh Kaplan book on reincarnation. So these are a collection of stories read by Jonas and Gershon about people who believe, mostly non-Jews, that they're reincarnated souls of people who, God forbid, were killed during the Holocaust. I don't know why I put this with my Kabbalah book. This is a semi-famous book. Actually, this girl who was coming to the Hare Krishna temple gave me this book. She was coming to the Hare Krishna temple, and she had some books on Kabbalah. I think she gave me another book too, and she was done with it and just decided to give it to me. And I hadn't read it before, but The Jew and the Lotus, and this is about a group of Jews who went to meet the Dalai Lama, including the Jewish renewal guy. I have his book. His name's slipping me right now. Avram Yeshua. So a little mystical stuff. It was a group of kind of spiritual seeking Jews who went on a delegation to meet the Dalai Lama. So random, I put it with my Kabbalah stuff. Here is an attempt to translate the Arizal's Eitz Chaim. The very beginning, Eliyahu Klein, translation and commentary of the Arizal's Eitz Chaim. And this is specifically about Kabbalah and creation from the very beginning. And it's kind of weak. I mean, you could try it, but I'm not sure if there's much better. There's not really that much. I studied with that guy Shmuel Schwartz, the Satmar Chassid, who was in Haight Ashbury in the late 60s and 70s and was part of a Gurdjieff cult. We started to study the Arizal's Eitz Chaim, and he knew Hebrew, Aramaic well enough that we studied from the text itself. But I bought this. I don't even know if I'd recommend it. I don't know if there's anything better. Another introductory book I bought off that African-American woman who sold anti-Semitic literature, God forbid, Pearl Epstein, Kabbalah, The Ways of the Jewish Mystic, and generic stuff about more like meditative techniques. I might have also got this book off of that woman in Brooklyn, Kabbalah, Tarot, and the Western Mystery Tradition, the 22 Connecting Paths of the Tree of Life. So, John Wolfe's big into the Tree of Life, and, and usually call it not Lamed Base Nesivos, 32 lines, but there's 22 connecting paths, plus the 10 spheres themselves. And so this kind of draws together some magic, tarot cards and various magic traditions, Clifford Bias, and this may not even be a Hebrew book, like it's the generic separated from Orthodox Judaism, just like Kabbalah as magic. But it's a little interesting that it talked about tarot cards and the Kabbalah of tarot cards. But like Kabbalists don't do. I mean, Kabbalah might be behind the tarot cards. Like I never saw any rabbi pull out tarot cards, God forbid. But if you want to say that the secret behind tarot cards is Kabbalah, it's probably that could be the case. So just interesting, random. On the mystical shape of the Godhead, basic concepts in the Kabbalah, Gershon Schoen, another famous book on basics of Kabbalah. I kind of like Adam Green. Like he reads books. Adam Green listens to the right rabbis and he reads books. Like he draws the opposite conclusions of Duvid. Even jokes about being like a reincarnation. If he says a reincarnation of a Moloch, if he said he's a reincarnation of Esau, that might be believable. Like Esau and the blue-eyed man, like a Moloch, I'm not sure, but at least Adam Green takes the wisdom seriously. He reads books, he has a good library, and he listens to the right rabbis. This girl went to the Roper School in Metro Detroit, younger than me. Was like part Israeli, went back to Israel and wrote like a book, Night Tales of Meron Mountain. It's not really Kabbalah, it's just kind of random stories from Meron, but because she went to the same high school as me, I bought her book, Gitto Marcus, Night Tales of Meron Mountain. So yeah, here's probably the most famous, well-known introduction to Jewish mysticism, Aryeh Kaplan's Jewish Meditation. And this made shocking publishers. It was published by a mainstream publisher. You could find this at like regular bookstores. Maybe millions of people have read this book. And so this is probably the most popular book on introduction Jewish meditation. Talks about quieting the mind, thinking about the four-letter name of God, introduction to what is meditation, and approach to Jewish meditation, and a lot of the basic things is he might have done some Eastern stuff, and so it's unclear if like Aryeh Kaplan did Eastern meditation and then kind of rework that into Jewish meditation. But there's some basic concepts in here, and it said this is probably the most well-known popular book, Jewish Meditation by Aryeh Kaplan. I'm not sure if it's still popular anymore, but it was. I'm going to check what year it was written. 1985. So yeah, I mean, I guess 1985. It's not that 40 years old. I think he passed away in the 90s before I started learning, or before that. Random. There's a lot of books like this that are really just mediocre. So here's Quantum Physics, Jewish Law, and Kabbalah, Astonishing Parallels, Aaron M. Schreiber. And a lot of these are mediocre, where they talk about physics concepts and try to tie it into Kabbalistic concepts. And, they're interesting. There's a lot of books like this. Like almost every rabbi has concepts and thoughts like this. Like when I was in Israel, like 1/4 of the rabbis I spoke to, like even Or Sameach, some mainstream lit facts, but like all kinds of rabbis, like they read about the latest discoveries in quantum physics, and they're like, oh, that's like Kabbalah. And like I mentioned Gerald Schroeder and the Science of God. And there's some interesting concepts and drawing parallels, and it's unclear of kind of like hopeful thinking, but definitely interesting. Here, autobiographical Jews essay in Jewish self-fashioning, and the reason I have this in my Kabbalah section is because it is there's no reason why this is in my Jewish section. So I'll put this back. Just an interesting book on the nature of the Jewish biography and autobiography. I thought this had Gershon Schoen in it, and that's why I had it here. This one I probably would recommend. Like, if you're going to get one Aryeh Kaplan book, I might recommend Inner Space. And Inner Space has Introduction to Kabbalah, Meditation, and Prophecy. So, there's some of the basic concepts and meditation. So there's meditation in the Bible, Jewish meditation. But this one, Inner Space, is the Aryeh Kaplan one I would probably recommend. Here's another Philip Berg one, The Star Connection, on astrology. As I said, Philip Berg, like the popularizer, generally most Kabbalists don't focus on astrology. They, believe that astrology has no effect, but kind of like the Kabbalah Center, the popularizer of Kabbalah to famous rich people, Israelis, non-Jews. That's what people want to know about. They want to know about astrology, and so Philip Berg has books on astrology. The Star Connection, decent book. I said Philip Berg studied under Rav Ashlag, and so the Star Connection. Another one, The 10 Keys, A Guide to the Entangled by Matis Cantor. And it's a decent book, Introduction to the Spheros and to conceptualize understanding the 10 Spheros. This was the book I was thinking about, Metaphysics of the Profane, The Political Theology of Walter Benjamin and Gershon Schoen. So Gershon Schoen, the most well-known scholar of Kabbalah, and Walter Benjamin's more an Israeli scholar, but talks about messianic stuff in the Jewish state. Here's an old Aronson book, The Owner's Manual to the Soul, A Modern Guide to Spirituality from the Most Ancient Torah Sources by Nehemiah Blavin. And it has Gates and your collection of sages' teachings to what is the Kabbalistic Jewish conception of the soul, and in a self-improvement type mechanism. Here's actually an art scroll book on the wisdom of the Hebrew months. That so it's not like straight Kabbalah or astrology, although it includes some of that stuff. So surprisingly, art scroll book that gives a little basic things about the Hebrew calendar and the Hebrew months, but also includes some of the Kabbalistic insight into the Hebrew months. Here's another popular style type book, Hebrew Sources of the Languages, and is Kabbalistic gematria insight on Hebrew being the source of all languages. I also show some more books on that later. And here, Gershon Schoen's Origins of the Kabbalah, another popular book. I show the Peter Schaefer book. So that's actually the extent of my Kabbalah books. So it's not really that many books. It said I've attempted. I'll show a few more that I have from other sections, but as I said, most I went to mainstream Hasidic and Orthodox schools. Kabbalah was not a mainstream subject. And even like I studied it more than most other people. Like there were a handful of people, like, I went to, but like generally the subject didn't even interest most Orthodox Jews that much. And, like it was more interesting to Baal Teshuvos and, people, even the amount that I studied it, I was discouraged. In fact, I remember, I was a pretty smart guy and, I got into Mir Yeshiva. I was studying mainstream Talmud, and I went to Reb Tzvi Meyer Zilverberg in Jerusalem to his Friday afternoon class, and it was in Yiddish. And he's pretty popular. I think he comes from the what they call the Malachim in New York, like the former Chabadsters that were integral in developing the first kind of mainstream orthodoxy in America, about 1915. And he was an American who moved to Israel, married, had a kollel, and it wasn't straight Kabbalah. Like it was more Hasidus. But a little bit of Kabbalah, he'd quote from like Litvish sources like the Nefesh Chaim of Chaim Volozhiner. And I was studying at the time with like a Litvish guy, and he found out, like he heard that I went to Tzvi Meyer Zilberberg, and he stopped learning with me. He's like, "What are you doing going to a Kabbalah class in Yiddish?" And he was basically like, "You got to stop going there." And I didn't listen to him, and he stopped learning with me because I was going to Tzvi Meyer Zilberberg. And Tzvi Meyer Zilberberg is not even that extreme, like relatively. Like a lot of people in Mir Yeshiva, like a lot of Litvish students also went to Tzvi Meyer Zilberberg. But so I just mentioned like that was like mainstream Litvish guy who was like severed his relationship just because I was going to Tzvi Meyer Zilberberg. And then, like the Talmud Yitzchak Rebbe, Rabbi Daniel Frisch, they're popular people in Jerusalem. So, like, the Mir Yeshiva, when I was there, they had a Chabura, Rav Yitzchak Yaakov Rakov was like the head, and the former Mishkiach, like a student advisor to Hasidic Bachrim from London, was partners with Tzvi Meyer Zilberberg. They had a Sholosh Shudos, and they'd sing and he'd give a speech, and they were affiliated with Mir Yeshiva. So like Tzvi Meyer Zilberberg was kosher for Mir Yeshiva. I would even say that like 25% of the people that went to him were students in Mir Yeshiva. However, like the Litvish guy was too much beyond the pale. So I just show those books there first and say that most Orthodox Jews don't study Kabbalah. Even most Hasidim don't study Kabbalah. You're more likely to find like Avram Yaakov Braun, who I mentioned, brought me my first Tanya, the Zidichover Chassid, studied Kabbalah. And in Borough Park, like he was known, like he studied Kabbalah and he studied with other Hasidim. But even that was relatively rare in Borough Park, people that studied Kabbalah. Like from Hasidim, probably like 1 out of 20, 25 people who study Torah, like people who regularly study Torah, will endeavor to go into the study of Kabbalah. And when I went to Itchy Mayor Morgenstern from London, who has a Kabbalah kollel, and actually Mordechai Ben David, the singer, is his most famous student. Encouraged me to study Kabbalah. And Bubba Yeshiva, like most people in Bubba didn't study Kabbalah. Like there was a handful that studied Kabbalah, but it wasn't necessarily encouraged, although maybe they wouldn't have gotten in trouble if they did. In Carlin Stolen, I don't think anyone studied Kabbalah really. There was really no one in Carlin Stolen that studied Kabbalah. So just mentioning, the nature, although, there, in Tolzar Yitzchak, they had a small school. Reb Daniel Frisch was expert, maybe foremost expert in Jerusalem on Kabbalah, was a chassid of the Tolzar Yitzchak Rebbe, but it's unclear really how much they study Kabbalah either. So more straight Hasidus. So with that, I will go into my Hasidic books. So just to mention, like mainstream yeshiva, you could even reject Kabbalah. Like Judas Maccabeus rejects that Kabbalah is even a Jewish thing. And there is some section in Orthodox Judaism that rejects Kabbalah, but most Orthodox Jews accept Kabbalah as part of the tradition, and that the sages, like the Vilna Gaon, a lot of the venerated sages knew and understand Kabbalah. Although, like the Rosh Yeshiva, like Nosson Tzvi Finkel, the head of Mir Yeshiva, it's unclear whether he studied or even his followers would have thought that he knew Kabbalah, or whether you need to know Kabbalah. So Hasidus, definitely all the Hasidic masters were thought to know Kabbalah, some better than others. And there's writings, and you could see the Kabbalistic teachings, like to a large extent, the Hasidic movement is based off the Arizal's Kabbalah. So you're just mentioning that with a little opening. So let me show some of my books on Hasidus. So try to do. Here, Norman Lamb is not Hasidic, although Hasidic friendly. He was the head of Yeshiva University, not even a rabbi, I think, but he wrote The Religious Thought of Hasidim, Text and Commentary, where it's a compendium, like encyclopedia of text and concepts on various concepts like the soul, faith, love and fear, Devekis, worship. Good book, compendium of translations and commentary on famous Hasidic masters. A lot of it, Kabbalistic in nature. Norman Lamb's The Religious Thought of Hasidim. If you don't know Hebrew, if you know Hebrew, then you could go to the main source texts. So even Duvid's Hebrew. I'll show some of my Hebrew books, but for me, it's a struggle. I could translate a Hebrew book, but I can't read it. Like with a dictionary, or I could get the gist of it, or if I wanted to study it, I could study it with a dictionary, or I'd need when I was in yeshiva, there would be people. But even all the time I spent in yeshiva, I still can't pick up a book in Hebrew and read it. God forbid. So if you're limited to the English language, good book, Norman Lamb's The Religious Thought of Hasidim. Here's another one, Tzvi Rabinowitz, The Encyclopedia of Hasidism. And I showed his book on some of the history of Hasidism. And this also has personalities, and it's literally like encyclopedia, A through Z of names, alphabetical. So here can mention Flames of Faith, an introduction to Hasidic thought by Sev Reichman, adapted from the Torah classes of Rav Moshe Wolfson. So Duvid served as a shamish in Rabbi Wolfson's Emunas Yisrael, listened to his drushas for over a year. Rabbi Moshe Wolfson, big scholar, is thought to know Kabbalah. Like he was mainstream in Torah Vadas, Hasidus. Rabbi Wolfson is not, it's unclear to say whether he's respected as a Kabbalist, but definitely knows quite a bit of Kabbalah, and Hasidus, kind of like Litvish kind of Hasidus, said he actually studied under the Lubavitch Rabbi. Personally, Rabbi Wolfson was one of the non-Lubavitch students of the Lubavitch Rebbe before he became Rebbe, in like the 1950s. Rabbi at the mainstream, Litvish yeshiva, Torah Vadas, taught lessons in Tanya, taught the Tanya. So here's just a collection of teachings of Reichman, Rav Moshe Wolfson. I showed this book before, the Menachem Mendel of Rimanov. So Menachem Mendel of Rimanov was one of the first Hasidic masters, disciple of the Maggid of Mizrich. His descendant, the Rimanov Rebbe of today, even comes to Detroit. I have him on my YouTube channel. And most of these books, so this has kind of like his thoughts and biography, and almost all books by Hasidic rabbis are commentaries on the Torah. So the book in practice is, on the Parsha in his collection. And when they wrote books like we'll see in the Talmud, they're like a gloss on the Torah, and it'd be, on the commentary on verses of the Torah. And then like as a book, it would, meant to be studied. So for a period of time, I would study the Torah really till a few years ago. But for over a decade, I tried to do at least one new commentary on the Torah every year. So, the Rimanover Rebbe commentary on the Torah. Here's also academic book, essential papers on Hasidism. Most of these are from academic scholars, not Hasidim. Here, probably one of the more famous, Zalman Schachter Shlomi, A Heart of Fire, Stories and Teachings of the Early Hasidic Masters. So Zalman Schachter Shlomi, together with Shlomo Carlebach, are like the two rabbis that didn't follow the dictates of the Lubavitch rabbi, because the Lubavitcher emissaries have to be Orthodox Jews. They have to keep the halacha. They have to keep the rules. So Shlomo Carlebach and Zalman Schachter Shlomi were not official emissaries of the Lubavitch rabbi, but studied under the Lubavitch rabbi, were trying to be emissaries of the Rebbe, but then went on their own and spread Kabbalistic and Hasidic teachings, but did not keep Jewish law well enough to be under Jim Bowden, Seraphim Goose, good to see you, well enough to be under the mantle of your respectable, from the sages, because they bent Jewish law too much. But probably to the wider audience, one of the most well-known in America, their schools, the renewal movement, meditation. I think he also met the Dalai Lama, like interfaith, was involved in Eastern stuff. Zalman Schachter Shlomi, but here is his book on stories and teachings of the early Hasidic masters, and say he was actually a student also of the Lubavitch Rebbe. Another one, James Mintz, Legends of the Hasidim, an Introduction to the Hasidic Culture and the Oral Tradition in the New World. Okay, so this is actually more Hasidic culture. I'll put this with my other book. It's not really Hasidic thought, but it's a pretty interesting book on how Hasidim came to America and the social structure. Here's another one, Zalman Schachter Shlomi, Wrapped in Holy Flames, Teaching and Tales of the Hasidic Masters. This is a academic book, but it's pretty good if you on Hasidic Hasidism as mysticism, and it talks about the Maggid of Mizrich. I bought this. It's an old, it's a University Princeton book. I bought a former library copy, but talks about Hasidic doctrine, meditation, and the author went through and collected from the early Hasidic literature, Hasidism as mysticism, and nice overview of the Maggid of Mizrich and some of the early Hasidic teachings and philosophy. Second, got a text message. Okay. So here, Louis Jacob, Hasidic Prayer, with a new introduction. This is a Littman Library of Jewish Civilization. Littman Library is academic Judaic studies. So an academic look at the Hasidic prayer. A lot of these people are like descended from Hasidim, or like Bali Tshuva, modern Orthodox with Hasidic leanings. Newman, Hasidic Anthology by Louis Newman, which is anthology of early Hasidic stories based on topic. And here, Martin Buber's Tale of Hasidim, Early Masters and Later Masters. So, Buber kind of more legendized and popularized Hasidic stories. So, Buber's collection of Hasidic stories. Here, Rabbi Meshulam Feibush Heller of Zbara and the Rise of Hasidim in Eastern Galicia, Uniter of Heaven and Earth, and early Hasidic master. And this also, I think, has a Torah commentary, but he was a student of the Maggid of Mizrich. Here's the Heschel tradition, the life and teachings of Rav Avram Yeshua Heschel of Apt, who was the famous rabbinic ancestor of Rav Avram Yeshua Heschel, who marched with Dr. Martin Luther King, who kind of became a conservative rabbi. So Avram Yeshua Heschel, who came to America, who was actually with Herschel Greenspan, and he was studying in Germany in like 1938, and got expelled from Germany with the rest of the Polish Jews, which led Herschel Greenspan to kill von Rath. So that's the later Avram Yeshua Heschel, and then came to America and became a conservative rabbi, Dr. Martin Luther King. But his famous rabbinic ancestor, Rav Avram Yeshua Heschel of Apt, I think he's also connected to Regin and the Friedmans, but a famous Hasidic rabbi. And there's also a decent book, Hasidic Psychology, Making Space for Others, Mordechai Rottenberg, and approach towards what you call Hasidic psychology, and concepts. Even has a little bit about monism, social contract, salvation, and the nature of psychology within Hasidic society, and Rabbi Rebbe Hasid community relations. Okay, so here are my Chabad books. So here, and I've read a lot more Chabad books. A lot of these Chabad English translations are very expensive. So, I didn't buy them. I'll show a few others if you want to buy translations. So, the rabbis generally gave, Maimorim, regular speeches, and those speeches were transcribed and they're studied, and they were usually weekly or special events. And if you're Chabad Chassid, the statement usually goes, you should read them all twice, and certain ones every year. So there's certain Maimorim that were speeches by the Rebbes that are known to be very famous and powerful, and that are encouraged to be studied often. And then there's other ones that are you're just the generic weekly speech. So even the Tanya. So here is the essential Hasidic text, one of the earlier texts. And when I talk about the history of Hasidus, I'll talk more about this hopefully Saturday night. The Likutei Amorim, the Tanya of Rav Shneur Zalman of Ladi, who became the Hasidic leader of White Russia after the Magadim is rich. There were two, Menachem Mendel Vitebs and Avram Kalischer, who were the leaders in that area, and then they went to Israel. And then there's later disagreement and dispute that's even mentioned in the beginning of Tanya with Avram Kalischer regarding like funding and funds that were supposed to go to support some of the first Hasidim that went to Israel. But Menachem Mendel became the leader of what area in White Russia. They have the towns, Lubavitch, Lide, certain towns, and built up the Lubavitch movement that had control over tens of small Jewish towns and even whole regions and part of Russia that would I'll talk Saturday night about the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and during different periods of time was controlled by Poland or Russia or different entities. And this was supposed to be the basic introductory text, the Beinoni, Sefer Shel Beinoni, how to be an average person. And what is an average person? What does it mean to be Hasidus? What does it mean to serve God? The mitzvahs and these various things, foundational texts of really all Hasidus. It said the Rav Avram Yaakov Braun, a Zidichover Chassid, gave me my first Tanya. I didn't even get it from Chabad. Many Hasidim, even Litvak, some Litvaks study this also, but like among Hasidim, maybe 25 to a third of Hasidim studied Tanya. Like the Lubavitch of like Hasidim probably only makes up less than 10% of Hasidim, maybe only like 5-10% of Hasidim. Like because Lubavitch's outreach has bigger numbers because people might in these days they don't even teach Tanya anymore. Like Rabbi Finman has a class on Tanya, but like these days most Chabad synagogues don't even teach Tanya. They just have synagogue or Judaism 101. They might have Tanya, but most people now who go to Chabad don't even learn Tanya. They don't even teach Tanya. But I said like probably like 1/4 to 1/3 of modern day Hasidim, they'll study Tanya as a foundational text. And even in the larger Orthodox world, it used to be when Chabad was trying to get more serious students, people would go to Chabad yeshiva, then they'll study Tanya. And if you're Lubavitcher, you study sections of Tanya every day, and you're supposed to finish it even once a year. Rabbi Babaya for a while tried to start a Tanya class. I'm not sure he followed through on that. Here's the famous lessons in Tanya that has commentary by Yosef Weinberg, and I'm not sure what happened to my volume 1, but these are very popular Chabad books that if you get Tanya, Tanya is written kind of like Talmud, that has the Hebrew, no punctuation, just like straight Hebrew text, no sentences, no periods, no punctuation. So it was meant to be kind of esoteric and hard to understand and need like someone to teach it to you. And so lessons in Tanya is very popular within Chabad. I think they were first in Yiddish, and they were translated from Yiddish to Hebrew, Yiddish to English. And then, actually, I mentioned Rabbi Itchy Meyer Morgenstern. So he actually recommends Yitzchak Ginsburg. And Yitzchak Ginsburg had a degree in mathematics, became a Baal Tshuva, and then settled in Kfar Chabad, the Chabad settlement in Israel. And I said, like, in number, Chabad is not a huge Hasidus in Israel. There's, it's top 20, maybe not even top 10 in number. That Chabad does outreach and represents hundreds of thousands of Jews in Israel, but of actual Chabad Hasidim, there might even be less than 10,000 in Israel. And the Rebbe settled what they call Kfar Chabad, which is a settlement out of Tel Aviv. And Yitzchak Ginsburg was one of the rabbis there, although he kind of became, God forbid, like a anti-Arab extremist. So he got caught up in extremist Jewish national politics that made him controversial, but the Rebbe encouraged him to write books. He wrote explanatory books, and actually has very good books. So here's The Art of Education, Consciousness and Choice, The Dynamic Corporation. This was probably his best one, introduction. So Ginsberg, The Anatomy of the Soul, is nice charts and an overview of the soul, the functions of the soul. I think he has another one. I think I have it somewhere. Maybe I lost it or borrowed. No one didn't get it back, on the Kabbalah of psychology that I mentioned, with the 3-part redemption, the submission, separation, and sweetening process. That's in the Kabbalah of psychology. All good books. And here are Chabad. Here's Awakening the Spark Within on Leadership, another Yitzchak, the Teachings of Kabbalah series. Here I have a few mimers. This one, if you had to get one to start, I'd recommend this one, Chaikaltsu on Avas Yisrael. Chaikaltsu is, I think, from a Parsha in Deuteronomy, and it goes into Samson and Avas Yisrael and basic Hasidic concepts. This is one of the ones like that in Chabad yeshiva, like younger, high school kids learn, that you might even review every year. This one more well known by the fifth Lubavitch Rebbe, Reb Shalom Dov Ber Schneerson, Chaikaltsu on Avas Yisrael. This is from the Keyhope Publication Society, created by the Lubavitch Rebbe. There's also the Hasidic Heritage series. So here's another popular mimer by Rabbi Shmuel Schneerson. I don't know what year that is. Earlier. So this is already like 150 years old. Mi Kamocha, True Essence, that also has basic Hasidic concepts. And Kuntras Eitz Chaim, The Tree of Life, a classic Hasidus treatise on the mystical core of spiritual vitality, Rabbi Shalom Dov Ber Schneerson. So these books are kind of expensive. Sometimes if you go to a Chabad house, so like Rabbi Babayev has some. Here, like Chabad of North Oak Park has a lot of these books. They're kind of expensive. Even like online, it costs like $30, $40 for, because they take a lot of time. The translations, they're not that many copies sold. But if you could find a good Lubavitch library, they have a whole bunch of these mimers, concepts. I've probably read tens of them. I studied in the local Chabad yeshiva some mimers years ago with a yeshiva student in Yiddish. So there's probably hundreds of these translated. I've studied tens of them. So this is a very good source to go to, these mimers of the Rebbes. Okay, so those are Lubavitch books. And as I said, anyone serious about Hasidic studies would probably start with the Tanya, and that's taught to high school kids. I think in high school that already people start studying those books in high school. So here are Rabbi Nachman Breslov books. So I'd mentioned Reb Dror. He's a popular internet speaker. He came to Metro Detroit at the Woodward Avenue Shul, and I bought his book. Not sure if he autographs books, but kind of basic. Here's a popular book in Israel the last decade that became even popular in wider circles, The Garden of Emunah by Rabbi Sholem Arush, a practical guide to life, kind of inspirational teachings, explanation of basic Hasidic concepts, and it became a popular book in Israel and even America. I remember like Irina Krush, the chess player who actually converted to Christianity when she won. She was interviewed. She said she was reading this book, but even became semi-popular in wider American circles. The Garden of Emunah. Sholem Arush is a popular, I think he speaks in English also, or maybe, no, it was translated by Rabbi Lazer Brody. But Rabbi Arush is a popular preacher in Israel. So Rabbi Nachman main works are called Likutei Maharan, which means the collection of teachings of the master. And so here's a translation and commentary of Likutei Maharan. I don't have the whole set, but if you're a big Breslov or Chassid, you study regularly, just like in Chabad, there's Tanya. In Breslov, there's Likutei Maharan. And here's a Breslov book in Hebrew, Eric Apayim, Slow to Anger. Just talking about the negative quality of anger. Here's a Aryeh Kaplan. I mentioned this book in biography, but I kept on Chabad, Until the Mashiach, The Life of Rabbi Nachman, an earlier book translated by Aryeh Kaplan. Reb Nachman of Breslov was the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, and Breslov is not really a large Hasidic movement. There's in Israel, it's probably even bigger than Chabad. So like Uman, the number of people that are historically Breslov or Hasidim is relatively small, but there's been revivalist movements and like the Nachman set, people chanting on the street. I would even say that Breslov has more influence than Chabad in Israel. That Breslov probably represents hundreds of thousands of people, and God forbid, a lot of criminals, a lot of army people, where they preach in prisons and to like drug dealers and dance on the streets, and also a lot of people from yeshiva Hasidic backgrounds that fall off the derrick, end up getting encouraged in their Jewish studies through Chabad. Through Breslov, and Breslov has two of the main concepts of he's boididus and he's boinidus of meditation, and most specifically talking to God in your own words. Rabbi Nachman, who was excommunicated twice, God forbid. Rabbi Nachman was younger, but a contemporary of the Alter Rebbe, Rishnei Zalman Schneerson. They met, covers the meeting in this book. He also, Alvin Kalish, he went to Israel. A lot of interesting stories. And, the Uman passing away, and now one of the biggest Jewish gatherings yearly, even the war in Ukraine, tens of thousands of Jews praying Rosh Hashanah in Uman at Rabbi Nachman's grave. So highly recommend this one, Until the Mashiach, The Life of Rabbi Nachman, his biography. Rabbi Nachman's Tikkun, and God forbid, Rabbi Nachman, the Tikkun Aklali, which is theoretically the remedy to spilled seed, to wasted semen, of saying 10 psalms. I think it actually comes from before Rabbi Nachman, but it was popularized by Rabbi Nachman, called Rabbi Nachman's Tikkun. And Rabbi Nachman has a lot of these prayers and interesting things. Anatomy of a Soul, Chaim Kramer, which kind of talks about the various body parts in the mitzvah the digestive system, the nervous system, and Hasidic, Kabbalistic, talking about the relation between mitzvah and spiritual concepts in the body parts, anatomy of the soul. Rebbe Nachman, interesting book. Another Arya Kaplan trend, Rebbe Nachman's Wisdom, and just a nice collection of the teachings of Rebbe Nachman. Another, the Aleph Beit book, which is like an A to Z kind of encyclopedia of topics, and then Rebbe Nachman's insight on them. This Land is My Land, Rebbe Nachman, History, Conflict, and the Hope of Land of Israel. Rebbe Nachman, in many ways, is like a precursor to Zionism. He traveled to Israel. He helped and encouraged Hasidim moving to Israel in already the late 1700s. And this one I actually studied in Hebrew. This is one of the books I struggled to get through in Hebrew. Pulled out a dictionary for words I didn't know. It's actually pretty basic Hebrew, but this is a commentary on Pirkei Avos based on the teachings of Rebbe Nachman, the Ethics of the Fathers. Okay, so finish off my Hasidus books. So another Rebbe, pretty popular Rebbe, like Rabbi Henry Abramson's rabbi. Kalman Columbia Shapira, the Piaseczner Rebbe, the Eish Kodesh as he's known of. So here's actually Henry Abramson's book, Torah from the Years of Wrath, who the Rabbi Shapira died in the Warsaw Ghetto. God forbid his son and wife were murdered in front of him, or stray bullets and then bombing, and eventually he died. And his books were buried and then found after the war. And his main book that's studied is this one here, Kabbalah Books, and I mentioned this in Books That Changed My Life, A Student's Obligation, Advice from the Rebbe of the Warsaw Ghetto, Rabbi Kalman Columbia Shapira. This is like a bar mitzvah book to a lot of Hasidic students. They're, study this book before their bar mitzvah. It's like inspirational, how to be a man, how to be a Hasid. Highly recommend this book. Here, Sacred Fire, Torah from the Years of Fury, 1939 to 42. So these are a collection of the Torah that was given by the Rebbe, much of it in the Warsaw Ghetto, and his weekly sermons, and a lot of them, very sad, or you see the struggles of, during the war, during the Holocaust, up to his own death, after the death of his wife and his son, and horrific tragedies. Still tried to be a Hasidic Rebbe, and do the mitzvahs with joy, and celebrating the Sabbath and giving the regular Sabbath commentary, Sabbath the sermon, regardless of the situation. Very inspirational. A lot of people draw inspiration. Rabbi Weinberg in the Five Towns opened up a synagogue called Eish Kodesh, Sacred Fire. Henry Abramson, that's what he wrote a book. He said Henry Abramson keeps a copy of this on his desk, and draws inspiration from it. And then Henry Abramson gave the historic overview of what was happening in the war, in the Warsaw Ghetto, at the time. This is a very interesting book, translated actually by a woman who was a student of Rabbi Zalman Schechter Shalomi. I used to give this book away even to bar mitzvah bokarim, and it's called B'nai Makshava Tova, Conscious Community, a Guide to Inner Work, about creating an advanced society of people who want to meditate and reach higher levels of consciousness. And very interesting concept. The introduction, and the whole book is a little bit interesting. So he wrote some more advanced stuff. He's most famous for Chavos Talmidim, student's obligation, that is probably maybe even more well read than the Tanya itself. So I said, like, of Hasidim, and there's a lot of various Hasidim. I don't know, maybe like 30-40% of Hasidim will study Chavos Talmidim before their bar mitzvah. Like, it's hard to anything to be universal these days. But this is an introductory, inspirational book for kids. This is by far the most popular book of the Piaseczner Rebbe. That's probably thousands of bar mitzvah students till today still study this book every year. The Eish Kodesh, the sermons, is popular among certain scholars or people who are big into the Holocaust history, God forbid. This is a less well-known book, but in some ways I think maybe his most important book of the Piaseczner Rebbe, the B'nai Makshava Tova, about creating an elite society of spiritual seekers. This is sometimes included at the end of a student's obligation, and just a collection of thoughts that were written down in the war that were unclear, like what in relation. So a lot of them are just short notes, like here, the ultimate proof of God. Certainly you've heard or seen the books that deal with the existence of God. For those who find it hard to believe, they try to prove that there is a God. They bring their proofs from creation itself, its inherent wisdom and almighty nature, but woe for you if you need their proofs. Have you not felt, have you not seen how your soul is so sure it sees God? You speak to him in second person, both in formal and informal prayer, because the truth is that your soul does see him present right there before you. And when your soul cries out in pain, I shall not fear because you are with me, you feel as if you are clinging to God, who then will heal your soul. Or when you yearn or pour out your soul, you say, God, please bring me closer. Help me surrender my very self to you because I yearn greatly to come closer. So why do you need abstract proofs of God that exist in your soul if your soul knows and sees it for itself? King Shlomo said that abstract wisdom is for fools and the empty-hearted, because who needs proof beyond personal experience? Only the fools and the empty-hearted. So, interesting tidbits. That's one's kind of like, God forbid, the Ramakrishna and Vivekananda, where when Vivekananda was a skeptic student and asked Ramakrishna, can he really see God? And Ramakrishna answered, I see God more clearly than I see you. So it's a similar light. I think the first one was kind of interesting. Now that I'm getting old, I think this one myself, but thinking that I'm just now getting prepared to start my life. I've studied for all these years, and just now do I feel ready to live my life, and now I'm getting old and turning gray and I'm about to die. God forbid. How rewarding would it be if after the end of our lives we could live another 70 years? We struggle a lifetime training ourselves to uncover our self-deceptions and to nurture the inner greatness of our souls. Then the second lifetime we could reap the fulfillment of living a perfected life, even in the imperfect world. But suddenly, after decades of struggle, instead we are gone, taken back into the womb of God. This being the case, the second best thing to do is to record your inner life in a journal. This will not be something you can earn immortal fame as an author, but rather to engrave your soul portrait on paper. Write down all your inner struggles, your setbacks, and your successes, and grant them eternal life. This way, your very essence, your personality of your soul, your spiritual attainments, and your life's inner treasures will live on forever in the lives of your spiritual heirs and generations come to go. So, Duvid here streaming of some insight onto that. But you're probably one of the more influential authors on Duvid. I put the student's obligation that in Hebrew usually has these in the back, and these sayings here in Aronson book, To Heal the Soul, the spiritual journal of a Hasidic Rebbe. Just interesting thought is God forbid Duvid becoming an old man, and now just feeling capable to how to live my life, and like my body's starting to get tired and weak, and death is approaching, just as I've attained enough wisdom to to live my life. Yeah, Michael, appreciate it. Happy Hanukkah. And here's another holy fire, the teachings of Rabbi Kalman Shapira, the Rebbe of the Warsaw Ghetto. So quite a few books. One of my favorites. Okay, so I think I'm going to light Hanukkah candles, and then I'll chant a song or two, and then I will finish up my my books. So there was my Hasidus and Kabbalah, and I'll go over some of the stuff I've tried to learn in Hebrew, like Torah and Talmud, and a few writings of famous rabbis. But now I will light Hanukkah candles. Duvid's a simple Jew. Puksha Yid doesn't even have a menorah. So you don't actually need a menorah. The candles is the main thing. The menorah holds the candles, but the mitzvah has nothing to do with the menorah. It's the candles itself. So here, tonight is the fourth night. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvosav, v'tzivanu ladlik ner shel Hanukkah. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shasa nisim lavoseinu, Bayamim Uheim Bisman Hazeh. Okay, happy Hanukkah, everybody. So the fourth night of Hanukkah, to encourage people to light candles and spread the light. There's also a very famous mimer of I think multiple of the Lubavitch Rebbe, but multiple Lubavitch Rebbes on light Kabbalistic concepts. I think Aryeh Kaplan in his Jewish meditation talks about meditating on candles, on flames. Aryeh Kaplan mentions the 4 colors of a flame. So you look at the flame, there's a blue, like a yellow, a lighter yellow, and then the inner darkness within the center of the flame. And that's like you're related to like the husk and shells or levels of the soul. And so Hasidim, Kabbalists are big into lighting candles. Like the flame represents the soul. Like the day of death in Hebrew called Yom Hashtalshus, the day of gathering, where all of a person's deeds are gathered together into one moment, and the flame is representative of that, of the soul, the power of the soul, the deeds, and so you just light the candles. Tonight's the fourth night, and you just meditate on the flames, and think of the ancient miracle, and God, uh, power to turn darkness into light. So all the Bhavitchers constantly say a little bit of lightness could shed light to a lot of darkness. The trick question of what could you do to fill up a whole room? It's like the dark room. So one candle, one light could fill up a whole dark room. And so be blessed with Hanukkah. So let me chant, do another Skulener tune. This is Psalm Glib. Happy Hanukkah. Psalm 21. Chaim Shul Mimchu Nasatu Lo Orik Yomim. Life we ask of you. Actually, let me bring this up so I get this right. Psalm 21. This was a popular Skulener tune. I've sang it before in my channel. Psalm 21, verse 5 and 6. Chaim Shol Mimchu Nasatu Loi Orik Yomim Oilam Voed. He asked you for life. You gave it to him. Length of days forever and ever. Gadol Kavoidoi Bishu Osechu Hoid V'Hodar Teshave Love. His glory is great in your salvation. Majesty and beauty, your place upon him. Chaim Shuel Mimchu Nussatu Loi Oirik Yomim Oilam V'Ved Chaim Shuel Mimchu Nussatu Loi Oirik Yomim Oilam V'Ved Gudol Kivoinoi B'Shiyusechu Oy V'Hodar Tishavei La Gudol Kivoinoi B'Shiyusechu Hoid v'hodar Tishavei La Chaim Shuel Mimchu Nussatu Loi Oirik Yomim Oilam V'Ved Chaim Shuel Mimchu Nussatu Loi Oirik Yomim Oilam V'Ved Gudol Kivoidoi V'Shiyusechu Hoid v'hodar Tishavei La. Okay, so that was a Skulener favorite. Skulener Rebbe used to sing that one. You basically every week, every gathering, there was a popular one in Skulener. Shaviti Havaya Shavisi Hashem Lenegdi Tamid. That's the verse that I don't know if the Shavishi Havaya, the God is opposite me at all times. So that verse is from Psalm 16, and it is usually written on synagogue walls, like in front of the Aron Kodesh, that refers to God, being in front of us at all time. The Skulener Rebbe had a famous tune for that. Shavi si Hashem l'negdi so'ami. I'd have to look that up to think. I'm not sure what tune they would have used in your meditation class. The Skulener tune, the Skulener Rebbe used to chant that. It was Shavi si Hashem l'negdi so'ami. Ki mini balemait Shavi si Hashem l'negdi so'ami. Ki mini balemait Lokain samak libi yogel v'yogel kevoidi Apisuri yishkon levatak. So that was a little complicated tune, but it's probably not the one that they taught in your meditation class. But very popular mantra. All Jews of any stripe are likely to know that mantra or have various tunes to that one. Let me do two more chants. So this is a popular Hasidic tune. It's in the regular prayer services in the Amida of the the Shemona Esrei that said 3 times a day. Hatoiv kiloi kuli rachamecha v'amrakim kiloi samu chasadeka kimielim kavinu lak. Hatov here referring to God, the beneficent one, for your compassion is never exhausted, and the compassionate one, your kindness never ends. For we have always put our hope in you. So this was a tune they used to chant in Sklen. There's a Satmar tune that's pretty popular, probably more popular, but I like the Sklen one. Hatov, 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 ki kuli rachamechu. Hatov, 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 ki kuli rachamechu. V'yam rachim. Ki samnu chasudechu, ki meyo oilam, ki meyo oilam, ki meyo oilam, ki vinu la. Atoy, 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 ki kuli rachamechu, v'yam rachim, ki samnu chasudechu, ki meyo oilam, ki vinilak, ki meyo oilam, ki vinulak. I hadn't sung that for a while. Probably off a little bit if and these are usually sung as a group. So just because it's Hanukkah, let me sing 2 more quick tunes. So these are also Skulener classics. This is probably the most well-known Skulener tune. I mean, there's a few quick tunes of like All Yedei Duvid and Chazdei Shem Kilo Samnu, but of that sung popular among Hasidim and even non-Hasidim, it's probably the Psalm 119 verses 51 to 50 to 52. Sorry, 49 to 51. Zachor davar liavdecha, all asher yichaltonu, zois nechamasi biyani ki imraska chayasni, zadim halatzini ad miod mitraska loy natisi. Remember the word you gave to your servant, that you made me hope, that the comfort for my affliction, the word that even though they have derided me greatly, I've not turned aside from God's law. So it's God forbid, rising anti-Semitism, and just say, even though people have slandered me and said bad things from me, that I stuck with God and I trusted in God's promise that He would redeem us and not forget our service. And this song actually comes from the Skulener Rebbe, the previous Skulener Rebbe's father. So this is a pre-war song, and it was popular among Jews in Europe before the war. And there's actually two tunes to it. Zochor davar le'avdechu, all asher yichaltuni, zois nechamasi biyani, ki imrascha chiyasni zois nechamasi biyani, ki imrascha chiyasni, zaydim halitzini yad miyod, mitaraska loy natisi, ay, zaydim halitzini yad miyod, mitaraska loy natisi. That might be the most well-known Skulener niggin among Orthodox Jews in general. In Sklen, they sang another tune that was really outside of Sklen. Almost never, no one heard the version I liked more, and always meant a lot. So whatever reason, this is the tune that's coming to my head now. Zocher davar li'avdechu, all asher yichaltum. That's slipping my mind how it begins. Zois nechumasi biyani, ki imraska chiyasni, zois nechumasi biyani, ki imraska chiyasni. So all these years I haven't slipping my mind. So the last verse of Psalm 119 was also a popular Skulener tune. Tuisi kaset oived bakesh abdika kibu mitzvaseka loy shakakti. I have gone astray like lost sheep. Seek thy servant, for I have not forgotten thy commandments. And the word for sheep is tuisi, and to seek is bakesh. So the song kind of has like the sheep sound of bakesh, like the ba sound of a sheep. So it's kind of humorous like that. Tuisi kisa oived bakesh Bakesh Avdechu Tu isi kisa oived Bakesh Abdechu. Let me look. Do one last one. This was also probably one of the more well-known verses and psalms in general, and because I went to Sklen so often, I like the Sklener tunes, and also because the Sklener tunes are not so well known outside of Hasidim, so I'll sing some Hasidic tunes that, unless you're familiar with the Sklener Rebbe, or you're probably not familiar with these tunes. Psalm 56, verses 11 and 12. 12 and 13. Bailohim batakti loy ira ma yase adam li ulai Elohim b'darecha shalom toides la. In God do I trust, I will not be afraid. What can man do unto me? The vows are upon me, O God. I will render thanksgiving unto thee. So Hanukkah, it was a military time of overcoming, where the Israelites, the Hashmonaim, had insurmountable odds to defeat the Romans, and so this is persevering. Have no fear what man might do to me, and John Wolfe, kind of like a mafia type song also. By Elohim butakti lo ira ma yase udam li. By Elohim butakti lo ira ma yase udam li. Ulai Elohim nidorecha Ashalem toidos lak Ulai Elohim nidorecha Shalem toidos lak. Okay, so let me do one more quick. I'll do a quick Hanukkah upbeat tune. This one was probably the most popular Hasidic Hanukkah tune, and it's like a slight variation on Hatikva, and because Hatikva is actually comes from an older tune, possibly a non-Jewish tune, but Hanukkah is the sanctioned Jewish version of nationalism. So the main Matzor prayer that's said on Hanukkah, Matzor Shuasi, which is probably like the German Reform tune, the White House dinner, that's or most even Chabad Hanukkah lightings, they'll use that tune. So there's a few. There's Hanerus Aluli. There's a very nice Vision. It's complicated tune to Hanerus Aluli I used to listen to over and over again. And so Mussar covers God helping us persevere over troubled times in the various kingdoms that had conquered over the Jews, ruled over the Jews, most specifically the Greek. So it's the fifth stanza, Yevanim nikvatsu alai azai b'mei hajmanim, ufartsu choimos migdu alai v'timu kol hajmanim, umenaiser kankanim nasines l'shoshanim, b'nei bina yemei shmoina kavushir uranim. Greeks gathered against me then in the Chashmoneim days. They breached the walls of my towers, and they defiled all the oils. And from the one remnant of the flask, a miracle was wrought for the roses. Men of insight, 8 days established for song and jubilation. Yevanim, Yevanim, nikvatsu alai, azai b'nei Chashmoneim. Uvartsu choimos miktu alai, v'timoi chol hajmanim, uminoisnar kankanim, nase nes l'shoshanim, b'nei bina yemei shmoina, kavushiranim, b'nei bina yemei shmoina, kavushiranim. Yevanim, Yevanim, nikvatsu alai, azai b'mei chashmanim, ufartsu choimos mikdu alai, v'timoi kol hajmanim, uminoisar kankanim, naso nes l'shoshanim, b'mei bina yemei shmoina, kavushiranim. Okay, so let me say Kriya Shema, and then I will finish my Torah books. Shema Yisrael. Okay. So here is the Art Scroll Psalms commentary, one of the earlier books that I bought. You mentioned Pirkei Avos. I have a lot of different, I've read lots of commentaries on Pirkei Avos. So here was the original, one early Art Scroll collection of commentaries on Pirkei Avos. Good set. Here's the Pirkei Avos Tehillim, and I actually usually keep these by my desk. So over where I sit in the glass table in the other room, I usually keep these by my desk because I reference them relatively often. And also, here is the Torah. So haven't been going to synagogue lately, so I read from the Torah myself. So here's their famous Tikkun Kroim, which has the Torah like it's written in the Torah, and then with the the dots and punctuation. So I keep these near my desk. I use them often. It was Leib Gershon of Metro Detroit, African American convert who reads from the Torah. He's a big fan of this book. I also have been meaning to study this more. Keep it by my desk. Very good book. Joshua Jacobson, Chanting the Hebrew Bible. And it's a lot about Hebrew grammar and the cantillation system of how the Torah is chanted, if anyone's been to synagogue services. And I'm going to go over my Rabbi Hirsch collection, Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch. So I have a big collection, as I'll talk about that in a minute at length. Here's the Etymological Dictionary of Biblical Hebrew. So if anyone studied Rabbi Hirsch's commentary on Torah, he has these etymology and word similarities. So someone, Matisse Howard Clark, put together an etymological dictionary of biblical Hebrew. keep this by my desk also. Usually this is enough for me to translate from Hebrew. So if just looking at the 3-letter root, so I keep this by my desk. And anyone who studied Torah, these are called Mikros Gedolos, and it collects together the most common commentaries on Torah, namely, so you have like a verse from the Torah, the Unklis, Rashi, Shipsei Chachamim, like random notes of the sages, the Or Chaim, Kli Yakar, Ibn Ezra, Balaturim, the Ramban. So this is almost every Orthodox Jew has these. Synagogues has it. You have like Chumash Rashi. So I keep these near my desk. I use these very often. So my psalm and my prayer book, but these are stuff that I use frequently, definitely weekly. Sometimes I haven't really looked at the psalms or Perkei Avos, but I keep them by my desk for reference. I use them regularly. When I was in New York, I was friendly with this guy they call Avremel Shem Tov. I think he's actually the brother of the wife of the Rabbi Shem Tov of the friendship circle here in Michigan. And he used to refer to Chumash Rashi Yidden. And like most modern Orthodox Jews, yeshiva Jews that aren't successful in studying Torah are we call it Chumash Rashi Jews, that like their Torah study basically consists of trying to read the Chumash, the Parsha, and understand what Rashi says. And they might have the Mikros Gedolos, some of the mainstream, most famous commentaries like the Ramban, the Or Chaim, various things, but they never really get to those. They never get past Rashi. So even in Orthodox Judaism, like the difference between rabbis and followers of rabbis, Rebbes and Hasids, is that referred to as your Chumash Rashi Jews. So here is very interesting. I almost for a while modeled myself after. I haven't talked too much about him. Maybe I'll bring more up. Reb Menasseh Ben Israel, who is the one who convinced Oliver Cromwell to let the Jews back into London. And he had an interesting story. He was friends with Rembrandt. He commissioned Rembrandt to draw pictures for Torah that he, had a commentary on. And he had questionable background. Like David's a half Jew. My lineage is questionable. So he was a Marrano, descended from converted people in the Spanish expulsion, and ended up in Amsterdam. And he was kind of like an assistant rabbi, but because he had questionable lineage, he was never advanced into the rabbinate. But he was a big scholar, spoke a bunch of languages, and was respected among the non-Jews. And he passed away, I think, on the boat ride back, but he was the one who went to convince Oliver Cromwell to let the Jews back in. And he also had stuff in here. I think this is, maybe this was Mikveh Yisrael. This is a translation of his famous text that includes some of his thoughts about the American Indians being the lost tribes of Israel, and different things. And this was written for Oliver Cromwell. So this was like the stuff that he wrote for Oliver Cromwell, including speculation about the American Indians being descendants of the lost tribes. Obviously, he was in Amsterdam at the time of the founding of the Dutch East India Company. And I mentioned the other book, the Asanya, the Portuguese synagogue there in Amsterdam. And here's another book that Menasseh Ben Israel wrote called The Conciliator, Reconcilement of the Apparent Contradictions in Holy Scripture. And this is a translation. It's pretty expensive. I think I paid $50 for this years ago. And is through Torah and prophets and goes through possible contradictions where it appears to say something in one place and something in another place. Type thing that Rashi sometimes, some of it's based on Rashi, some of it is own speculation, called the conciliator of, say various ways to understand possible contradictions in the story in the Torah and prophets. Hopefully I'll have time to talk more about Menasseh Ben Israel. Someone I kind of modeled my Judaic studies after. He's also a little bit of a Kabbalist. Okay, so another famous rabbi that I've studied a lot of works from, the Ramchal, Rabbi Chaim Moshe Luzzatto, who actually did a series on his Mesilas Yesharim. I might have lent my copy. I don't even know where I have. I did a whole series on, like 10 videos on Mesilas Yesharim. It was one of the first things I did on my YouTube channel. But he wrote a lot of books, in Italy about 350 years ago, before the Vilna Gaon, before the Baal Shem Tov, one of the first popular expositors of Kabbalah, called like Mussar Swarm. So he has deep philosophy, one of the most quoted people on understanding, deep esoteric issues in Judaism. Here's popular book Das Tvunos, The Knowing Heart, which is philosophical questions set up in this book as like questions between like the intellect and the heart, talking about deep philosophical questions like the nature of evil. And Luzzatto was a very famous Kabbalist. So it's a conversation between like the intellect and the soul, covering mystical philosophical concepts. If you're really into Kabbalah, this is probably one of the main texts that this is, Kalak Pite Chokmah. I even tried to study this in Hebrew. My Amma, you my Amma bookmark. 138 openings of wisdom. This was translated by Greenberg, who I think has the Azamra webpage, and this is an overview of all of the major Kabbalistic concepts in 138 gates of wisdom. An introduction to Kabbalistic concepts, mostly based on the Arizal's Kabbalah, but there's some variants that call like Luzzatto Kabbalah. So I had this together with my, books from the same author. But if you wanted to, this is probably the best advanced introduction, like the Philip Berg books, the other books, Yudik Nefesh. This one's a little bit more advanced. So after you've read some of the introductions to Kabbalah and like the intermediate introduction to Kabbalah, this one of the Ramchal, Kalak Pite Chokmah, translated into English as 138 Openings of Wisdom, probably the best one. And here also have in Hebrew, I think Rabbi Shorsher was teaching Derek Hashem in different synagogues. And I have this one in Hebrew. I studied this with Rabbi Gottlieb, David Gottlieb, when I was in Orsamek. Had a class on this, and I went through the whole class, The Way of God, which is just the overview of Jewish theology. Why did God create the earth? What's the purpose of us being here? What happens when we die? What's the origins and destination of souls, and the purpose of Israel and mitzvahs, and very essential, very popular book, well known in yeshiva circles. Although he was actually, I'm not going to talk too much about his biography. There, like Henry Abramson has a biography. He was excommunicated. He's actually buried next to Rabbi Akiva in near Tiberias, near Meron. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, that he makes it to Israel, dies young, and is buried right next to Rabbi Akiva. I prayed at his grave. Rabbi Luzzatto, Derek Hashem, also basic text, the path of the righteous, Derek Hashem. Here's one, like Adam Green favorite, Maimer Hagula, Secrets of the Redemption, Unveiling the Process Towards a Perfect World, which is the Ramchal's understanding of what happens at the end of days, and how redemption and Messiah unfolds. And it might be interesting to go over these books. So another two books, the Ramchal, The Way of Reason and The Book of Logic, which are guides to Talmud study. And I believe they have these inserts. So the book has these graphical inserts, one side in Hebrew, one side in English, the ways of reason, the Talmudic method, analysis, logical terminology, order of study, foundational elements of debate, statements, juxtaposition, inference, and kind of like, it's probably based on Aristotle. So he was an Italian rabbi. He was actually in Rome. So most of this stuff is more Aristotelian, and he had trouble even with the rabbis who questioned his use. And here's another divisions of logic, syllogisms, and various things. So it might be interesting to go more in depth on these books. These aren't well studied. I think they're actually translated by the diaspora yeshiva, Rabbi Goldstein. Also, God forbid, somewhat of an extremist. They had in the old city, the diaspora yeshiva. So Feldheim translated in diaspora yeshiva. So these aren't well studied books. They're very important. Maybe if I had time, I'd go more in depth into these. And they're kind of like rules of logic and debate and reason. So another rabbi I studied in depth and kind of modeled myself after, like German Orthodox rabbi, studied in Nickelsburg. Also served the Nickelsburg Rebbe, Rabbi Jungreis in Borough Park, and Rabbi Hirsch. One of his first rabbinic appointment was in Nickelsburg. Nickelsburg, going to Shmuel Schmelke, one of the early students of the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid of Mizrich. And so here's his magnum opus called Horeb, a philosophy of Jewish laws and observances, and very good overview of what it means to be a Jew. Why do we do all the various rituals and laws and observe the law, the philosophy behind the laws and practice. Horeb, Horeb, Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, one of the leading rabbis in Germany in the 1800s. I think I had the biography. I mentioned Rabbi Breuer, might have been his son-in-law. And one year I studied his commentary on Torah. So he wrote that in German. It's translated into English. His commentary on Torah is very good. Here's also a famous Mussar book, Orchis Tzadikim, The Ways of the Righteous, that goes over character traits. So each chapter is a character trait: pride, humility, shame, arrogance, love, hatred, mercy, cruelty, joy, worry, regret, anger, willingness, envy, zeal, laziness, magnanimity, miserliness, remembrance, forgetfulness, silence, falsehood, truth, flattery, slander, repentance, Torah, and the gate of heaven. So this is like an 800-year-old book, very well known, well studied. Most people in yeshiva, one of the books that people studied, I think one year in the Menasseh Ben Israel, they had a different Mussar book that the whole congregation studied each year. One year it was this, maybe another year it would have been Mesillas Yesharim of the Ramchal. And here, I saw this actually out of print. I saw this was going for like a few $100s. I paid $155 at Eichler's for it. And was published by Feldheim. The collected writings of Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch. So the 8 volumes. I also have his Siddur commentary on the prayer book. But this is the 8-volume collected works of Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch. I keep it on top of the shelf. So if you notice in my background, these books on top, these are the collected writings of Samson Raphael Hirsch. So this shelf here has my Talmud collection, and on top is the Mishnah and little books of the Mishnah. For years I carried these around. I've studied the Mishnah many times. I have some art scroll translations, and the bottom shelf also has more Talmud, some art scrolls. This was the first year I started Daf Yomi when I was in Israel. Because I used to write the words and stuff on the side, and like the English words, and I'd have all these words on top to try to just simple translation, and for the meanings of words, and some notes on the side. A very common thing for people to do. I have a few random Hebrew stuff that was probably given to me for like certain events. Here's the Practical Talmudic Dictionary by Yitzhak Frank. One of the first books I bought, like when I first got to Israel, that has the main Aramaic words and expressions in the Talmud, basic Aramaic for Talmud, the Practical Talmudic Dictionary. Yitzhak Frank. And when I was in yeshiva, like a lot of people had this book. I'm not sure if they came out with a better one or till today, because the Talmud is in Aramaic. So it's a pretty good book if you want to actually study Talmud, the practical Talmudic dictionary, basic Aramaic expressions and Talmudic expressions. There was another one that had a chart. I mentioned Rabbi Lau in the biography. Rabbi Lau's 4-book biography of the sages. That's an overview. Benjamin Lau, the son of former Chief Rabbi Lau, passed away, blessed memory. 4-volume, the biography of the sages of the Talmud. Here was a book they handed out to Tolzar Yitzchak Hasidim. You could see, Hebrew, Tolzar Yitzchak, Bashiri, Kadmon, Al Shira Sayam. And it's a commentary on, Passover, on the Shira Yam, the said in the morning prayers every day. And this, it wasn't written by the Tolzar Yitzchak Rebbe. I'm not sure who wrote it, but it was, they handed it out at some event or wedding. I have a few prayer books, a few other Hebrew books. There's Dishan calling back in a bit. Okay, so on the top shelf there, I have some basic, more books. Here, Rabbi Hirsch's commentary on Psalms. I have Aryeh Kaplan's Maimonides' 13 Principles. I also have that we learned Mark Shapiro's book on that. One year I studied, here's like the Art Scroll Tanakh Prophets translation. Here's interesting, the Rebbe Nachman Passover Haggadah. I used this some year. I studied through this in Hebrew. I used to hand these out, the Rebbe Nachman, like No Longer Alone. God forbid, do it still alone. Few Rebbe Nachman stuff in Hebrew. Oitzer Chino Yoldim, the collection of educating children. Here was Hishtakfus Umeshivas Nefesh. This book was called Outpouring of the Soul. I have an English translation. This is like the founder of the Nachman sect in Israel. It's translated into English, I think, actually by Aryeh Kaplan, also called Outpouring of the Soul. I actually read that in Israel when I was first there. Pretty good book. I have Jonathan Sachs' Passover Haggadah. Guard Your Tongue, The Laws of Lashon Hora, based on the Chaim. Very important stuff. Guard Your Tongue, more Passover Haggadah, some random, The Living Talmud, The Wisdom of the Fathers, popular book. I had my Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur Machzor, the Art Scroll, Nusach Expired Rosh Hashanah. Rabbi Chaim Delphin on davening. I got that book a long time ago. A benching book from Rabbi Babayev, his son's wedding. This one I studied through in Hebrew 1 year. Yes, I tried to learn a different major commentary on Torah each year. This is the Sefer Chinuch, which is the 613 mitzvahs divided up by weekly Torah portion that has the mitzvahs in basic commentary in the verse that it comes from and how it's practiced. The very famous book Sefer Chinuch. And I was a driver in the summer camp of the Tartakov Chabad, who is descended from the Minchas Chinuch which is the commentary. So this one was written actually just for the son, like a rabbi, wasn't even like a popular rabbi written for students. He wrote it for his son, but it became a very popular book. And the commentary on Minchas Chinuch is, the Rabbi Chabad of the Tartakov, popular rabbis in Borough Park. Here's also fundamental text. The Mishnah Berurah, which is the Chofetz Chaim, Rav Yisrael Meir Kagan, commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, Jewish law. So here's the English translation of different sections of it. So this, like in yeshiva, like fundamental text. So you have the halacha and the Shulchan Aruch, and then the commentary of the Mishnah Berurah. Here's the English translation. Random, the Malbin commentary on Mishlei, Proverbs. The commentary, Sabbath, insight into the Sabbath prayers. You have the prayer book. This is actually a very good book. The laws of family purity according to the Sephardic custom of like nida, menstrual cycles. So important stuff to know for marriage and the menstrual blood taboo and laws and ritual. Another commentary on Pirkei Avos. This one actually was from my bar mitzvah at Reform Synagogue when I was 13. Like a simple version of Pirkei Avos, Ethics of the Father for kids. That I read that when I was very young. Noam Elimelech, God forbid. I used to carry this around with me for good luck. It's like a microfilm of the book, the Noam Elimelech, and then for years, God forbid, I used it to cut up cocaine. God forbid. So I did a lot of cocaine with this, but it was actually a good luck charm. It was the microfilm of the famous Hasidic book, the Noam Elimelech. This was my rabbi when I was bar mitzvah at Temple Beth El as a youth, Rabbi Daniel Polish. So he wrote a book on Psalms. Another famous one, the Avos to Reb Nosson, translation into Aramaic similar to Pirkei Avos. So just a few more. So here, I'm actually friends on Facebook, and he had been on Root and Branch with Lowell Gallen, Isaac Mosenson, The Origin of Speeches, Intellectual Design and Language, theoretically of Hebrew being the origin of all languages. And here's an academic linguistic book, The Language of the Jews, A Social Linguistic History, that looks at the various languages that Jews spoke in various countries like Ladino and the rise of Yiddish from ancient times. These are some of the first books that I bought in Israel. The Shomer V'Lasois, The Guide to Basic Principles of Jewish Laws and Application in Theory and Practice. And the other version that is the Jewish Holidays. And I'm not sure if this is Hebrew, English. No, it's just English, but your basic compendiums, overviews of Jewish law, popular books, one of the first ones I bought when I moved to, when I was studying in Israel. Isaac Asimov, the science fiction writer that actually wrote a guide to the Bible. Here's a Art Scroll translation and commentary on the Mishnah. This one is Masechtas Nedorim. And here's Chavos Levavos, another book that I studied in Hebrew, Duties of the Heart, that I said one of the books that changed my life, and I did a whole series on my YouTube channel. This book, it was a book that I struggled and studied in the original Hebrew and translated, and I've read multiple English versions, but it's one of the books that I struggled to read in the original Hebrew. I have a few Art Scroll commentaries. The Art Scroll on Divrei Yamim Chronicles. I bought these. This was like the mass compendium Art Scroll of commentaries on Genesis. I think they did the whole Torah, whereas like the Mikras Gedolos, which just had a whole compendulary of different commentaries on the Bible, rabbinic commentaries. And as I mentioned, the Or Chaim, I've prayed at the Or Chaim Shul, prayed at his graves multiple times in Jerusalem. A lot of people say Rabbi Wolfson used to tell the story of like the soul of Messiah going from the Or Chaim to the Baal Shem Tov, but one of the main commentaries on Torah. So here's a translation of Genesis of the Or Chaim. Here's a famous Kabbalistic work I tried to study in Hebrew, Seder Hayom, that gives like the Kabbalistic meaning behind the daily ritual. Unity of Torah, Yeshua Hanigwak's, a contemporary commentary on the organization and purpose of the 5 books. It's just a random commentary on Torah. This one's a popular, the nature song, which is called Parak Shira. It's a Talmudic book of sayings of nature, and so it's a commentary. And actually, see the name in it. So I think I borrowed this one, never gave it back when I day traded. This was one of the books that, God forbid, I borrowed this and never gave it back. But I say someone's name in it. Wait, a lot of dust, and so I'm just going to show 2 more books. So I said Rabbi Daniel Frisch, you wrote the commentary on the Zohar. Is very famous for that, but his most famous book that he's most well known for is this book, and it's actually in Yiddish, Yemei Bechoros Ubar Mitzvah, and it's written for bar mitzvah students on what they need to know to be a good Hasidic bacher. This is the most popular book. It's probably even more popular than the Student's Obligation that I mentioned, a very popular book that students read before their bar mitzvah from Daniel Frisch in Yiddish. And this one is actually written by Rabbi Babayev here of Congregation Avos Yisrael, who I served. I used to pray there for a few years, worked for his son. And he wrote a book on Ben Chamesh Lemikra, Al Nani Hinik Habanim Bederek Halimid Hanirtza, on at the Mishnah says like at 5 years old you should start learning Mikra, which means verses of the Torah. So it's Rabbi Babayev's of Michigan, Avos Yisrael's book on child rearing. Okay, Shamish. So that's actually all my books. We got here 2 pamphlets from the ADL and Sukkot Detroit. So maybe I'll ramble, sing another song or two. So any questions, you can do it at Duvid, or else I'm going to wrap up. So Samish, do any of your books speak at length of the logical inference about why Hashem chose the Hebrews to receive the Torah? The Ramchal and Derek Hashem. So Rabbi Arya Kaplan has a book on that where he kind of gives like a parable to that. The Ramchal speaks about that. Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch and Horeb speaks about that. Seraphim Goose, God forbid, once rolled a joint with the Sermon on the Mount. So like, yeah, I kind of carried that around as a good luck charm, and I guess it served as a good luck charm. Like I never went to prison, I never got beat up. But God forbid, you need something to slice the blow, and I had that with me. I used that many times. God forbid, but I guess it served that good luck charm that never nothing that bad ever happened to me. So thank God there finishes Tau KL. Thanks for tuning in. Shalom. Happy Hanukkah. So there you have it. There you have the completion of my Jewish books. Like I've read a lot more books that are on these shelves. These are the ones I own. As an Orsamaic, I read hundreds of books in their library. Various synagogues, and when I first got to Borough Park, there was a lending library. Different people's houses that I stayed in. I read, a lot of times like a book a night before I went to sleep, or over a few nights. Here in Michigan, other books that I've lent out or borrowed, didn't get back, or I might have upstairs or different places. The last few years I stopped buying books. I read books online. So this is just my personal collection, and it's good to have went through it. Hopefully, some people who like watching Duvid, if Jim Bowden was here, you get some good ideas of Jewish books that might be interesting to you. And next week I will continue, probably because next week will be after Christmas, but maybe next week I'll do my Christian books. I have two shelves directly behind me of Christian books, and then I have a big stack of Christian books that I haven't read yet. So likely next week I'll do my Christian books, and then I still have, because those are all together in one section, and then maybe after that I will move on to I have to organize. So I have my business books, my some like technology books, psychology, linguistics, consciousness, history, politics. So I definitely keep this going probably for another 2 months. So next week, Wednesday, 4 p.m., I'm going to plan on my Christian books, and Saturday night, probably 6 p.m., I will start my new Saturday night series on a Jewish topic. This week, I'm planning on the history of Hasidus. So thanks everyone tuning in. Hopefully it's useful. But some comments in the chat if you want, and from here, let me close out with a niggin. I'll do another popular, one of my favorite Skulener niggin, Nagunam. Ya na 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 ya ya ma ya 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 na 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 ya 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 ma da ya 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 ma ma da ya I did it ya 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 ma ya ya ay 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 ya na na ya I did it ay ya 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 ma ya ya ma ya ya I did it ay ya 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 I did it ay ya ya ay ya ya I did it ay ya 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 I did it ay ya ya ay ya 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 da da ya. Purple, thanks for tuning in. Happy Hanukkah. I actually know most of the major Chabad Nigunim. Let me thinking this from get my prayer book. Just this is a popular Hasidic tune. I'm not sure how old it is. It's from Shir Shirim. Ani Yeshena Valibi Air. Like, I'm asleep, but my soul is awake. And they used to sing this by Rabbi Wolfson, but it's an older, popular Hasidic tune. It's from the same verse. Maybe also do the Chabad tune. Ani Yeshena Valibi Air. Ani Yeshena Valibi Air. Kol doi di doi fake piskubuli. Kol doi di doi fake piskuli. Kol doi di doi fake piskuli. Kol doi di doi fake piskubuli. Kol doi di doi fake piskubuli. Kol doi di doi fake piskuli. I'm looking for where that comes from. And I think it's in the 5th chapter of Shir Shirim. And the words, I'm asleep, but my soul's awake. My a voice knocks at the door. Let me just try to find that. And then there's the famous song from the Alter Rebbe from the same words. Ani Yeshena Valibi Air. Ani Yeshena Valibi Air. Ani Yeshena Valibi Air. Ani Yeshena Valibi Air. Kol doi di doi fake piskubuli. Kol doi di doi fake piskubuli. Kol doi di doi fake piskuli. 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 Oh, so here it is, Shir Shirim, the Song of Songs, the King Solomon, chapter 5, verse 2. Ani l'sheni, l'shena, valibi air, kol doi di doi fake piskuli. Here they have I let my devotion slumber, but the God of my heart was awake. A sound, my beloved knocks. He says, open your heart to me, my sister, my love, my dove, my perfection. Admit me in my head is filled with the dawn-like memories of Abraham. Spurn me and I bear collections of punishing rains and exiled nights. So there's a famous song of one of the 10 songs of the Alter Rebbe, Rebbe Schneur Zalman, the Balatanya, on these words. Although he starts with Kol Doidi without the Ani, the Shani of the Libi air. Kol Doidi Doifek, Doidi Doifek, Piskuli Yachoy Sirayo Voisi Yavoy Nasi Samosi Piskili Yachoy Sirayo Voisi Yavoy Nasi Samosi Called Doy. So I didn't prepare this song, so I have to listen to it. To I'm singing this slightly off. Any Chabadster would, realize I'm singing it slightly wrong. Apologize about that. Called Doy Di Doy Di Doy Di Doy Fake Piskuli Yachoy Sirayo Voisi Yavoy Nasi Samosi Piskuli Yachoy Siroisi Yavoy Nasi Samosi. Then it has a niggin part without words. Ya ma 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 ya 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 ma 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 ya ya ma ya 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 ma ya ya ma ma ma. Oh yeah 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 yama ay yeah yum I did I yeah yum ay yeah yum I did I yeah yum ay yeah 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 mum ay yeah 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 mum oh yeah 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 mum bum 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 bum. So I apologize, and I should have prepared that one. So happy Hanukkah. Slightly off on that tune. It's a famous tune going back 250 years from the Alter Rebbe. And since I'm here in Shir Shirim, which I'm not sure has any connection to Hanukkah, but I'll sing the one that told Yitzchak Rebbe. This is actually a Skulener tune that was a gift to the Vizhnitzer Rebbe, and they used to sing in Tolzar Yitzchak, also from the 5th chapter of Shir Shirim, verse 16. Hikoy mamtakim bekiloi makmadim zed doidi v'zerei b'nois Yerushalayim. The words of his palate are sweet, and he is all delight. This is my beloved, and this is my friend, O nations who are destined to ascend to Jerusalem. Hikoy mamtakim bekiloi makmadim Zedoidi v'zerei Uchi koi mamtachim Uchi loi makmadim Zedoidi v'zerei Zedoidi v'zerei B'nois Yerushalayim Zedoidi v'zerei B'nois Yerushalayim. So let me try to remember one niggin. So I haven't, God forbid, I'm falling out of my Judaism, forgetting my nigunim. I used to have these nigunim, tunes in my head all the time. I used to chant more psalms. I think I remembered these tunes because I would chant psalms often, but I haven't been chanting psalms that frequently, so forgetting my nigunim. This was one of my favorite. It might be a Kretschnoff tune. They used to sing it every week in Kretschnoff, and I think they sang it to. I'm forgetting the words, but they sang it occasionally. Like Satmar Hasidim, general Hasidim might know the tune, but I think they used to sing it when I was in Jerusalem by old Kretschnoff Rebbe every Friday night. Ya na 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 ya na na ma ya ya mam ya 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 I did I ya 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 ma ya ya mam ya 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 ay 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 ya na 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 yam ay 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 yam ma 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 ay 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 ya da da yam ay 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 yam da da yam ay ay yam ya na 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 ni na ya 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 mam ay na 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 ni na ni na ni na ma ya ya ay na 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 ni na na ya mo ay na 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 ya ma ma ya 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 ay ya ya ma 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 ya na na ya ay 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 ma 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 ay 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 ma 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 ay 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 Now do the quick Vishnitz one. For some reason, I remember in Tolzar Yitzchak them singing this one on Hanukkah. And there are Hanukkah songs, but I don't have a Hanukkah one. So these are just generic positive words. I've sang this one relatively frequently on my YouTube channel. It comes from the blessing before being called to the Torah on weekdays. Visegula visareya malchusu aleni bisman kuroiv v'yochon pleitasenu pleitasamo beis Yisrael l'chein l'chesed rakmin rotzain. And may his kinship over us be revealed and become visible soon. And may he be gracious to our remnant and the remnant of his people, the family of Israel. In this Vishnitz tune, kind of like a rocking Vishnitz tune. Visegula visareya, visegula visareya, malchisu alaini, malchisu alaini, bisman, bisman, bisman kuriv. Visegula visareya, visegula visareya, malchisu alaini, malchisu alaini, bisman, bisman, bisman kuru, uyochain, pleitasaini, pleitasainu, pleitasamo beis Yisrael, l'chein, l'chein, l'chesed, l'chein, l'chesed, rakaminu, l'rotzain. Hey, thanks, Jim. Yeah, I saw you appeared on the Crucible. It's the only time. I'm not sure if you stream regularly, Jim, but your props, you show up, you get quite a bit of library yourself there. So it'll be interesting if you meet up with Luke Ford IRL or if you start doing your own streams. And it might be interesting for Jim Bowden to do a tour of his library. Definitely looked like he had some interesting books. So let me do one more. This is Psalm 22. And this is a famous Chabad tune. B'chu botchu avosenu botchu b'letesenu elecha zachu v'limnatu b'chu botchu v'loishi. In you we trust our forefathers, and we trust that we will be given salvation. To you will save us In you we trust and are not embarrassed. This is Psalm 22, like verse 4 or 5. It's a famous Chabad tune. You could see videos of the Luzzatto Rebbe chanting this one also. Bichu Bachu Avoseinu Bachu V'Valteimoi Bichu Bachu Avoseinu Bachu V'Valteimoi Oy lechu zachu v'nimlatu B'chu batku v'loy voishi. Oy lechu zachu v'nimlatu B'chu batku v'loy voishi. Okay, so as I was singing this, my Hanukkah candles went out. So let me do one more popular blessing. But yeah, so happy New Year's, happy Hanukkah, happy holidays to our friend in Australia, Jim. It was good to see you on the Crucible. I know they invited you for a debate, so they got a pretty big platform, so that would be interesting. Props to you if you decide to do that. So this is, I think it's Psalm 90, the last verse, Orik Yamim. Oirik Yamim Azbiyehu Veyareyu Bishiyusi. Oirik Yamim Azbiyehu Veyareyu Bishiyusi. Oirik Yamim Azbiyehu Veyareyu Bishiyusi. Oirik Yamim Asbiyehu 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 Veyareyu Bishiyusi. Okay, so happy Hanukkah. Thanks for tuning in. Saturday night, I will try my new series, Jewish History and Concepts. I might just call it Ask the Rabbi and continue with that series, but I will be talking about the history of the Hasidic movement. And in the future, I will cover some Hasidic concepts. I'll be more focusing on the history, starting about 350 years ago. God forbid, in the wake of the Kalmetsky massacres, I guess big news that Zelensky, President Zelensky, is speaking to Congress maybe right now. So, big news. So the Hasidic movement, the Baal Shem Tov, started in Ukraine in the wake of the Kalmetsky massacres. God forbid, Kalmetsky is seen somewhat as a hero in modern day Ukrainian nationalism. But the Jewish community was decimated, and then Shabbatai Tzvi came and afterwards, and the Jewish community was further decimated from the fallout of Shabbatai Tzvi. And that's in the late 1600s, the era that the Baal Shem Tov arose in, and his students through the 1700s. And I'll look at the history of so the legend aspect of what it means for Jewish identity and even Jewish history in general, because Judaism is an identity, and the Jewish identity is basically based on legends. And what it means to be Hasidic is not based on an academic understanding of the history of Hasidim. It's based on the legends of what it means to be Hasidic and the legends of rabbis, and the movement of the Baal Shem Tov and students is somewhat ahistorical and a study of legends, a hagiography of saintly men. And so I will, that's part of why I developed the multiple truth hypothesis, to understand these things. What do we know from history, and what do we know as a believer who believes in legends and saintly people, and even the unbroken tradition from ancient times today, and that God's will is seen through the sages. We talked about Kabbalah today, and I mentioned like Philo and the origins of the demiurge, and Kabbalistically, like the concept of the Jewish people, to look as the Jewish people as part of the demiurge, like in a positivistic way. You would say that Jewish people push progress forward towards the eventual messianic coming and redemption. And like the mainstream yeshiva Orthodox tradition is Judaism without purpose. This is the law we must follow. It doesn't need a purpose. To the Kabbalistic, Hasidic, the Kabbalistic approach, Judaism with a purpose, a demiurgic purpose, and the Hasidism with the attachment to God and prayer and chanting and mitzvahs and love of God, love of the Jewish people. And so look forward Saturday night to probably aim for 6 o'clock to my first stream on the history of the Hasidic movement. So happy Hanukkah, everybody, and God bless.